Hey guys, I'm T and welcome to the channel. If you're new here, we make trendy and fun crochet tutorials twice a week, and if you haven't already, smash that like button, drop a comment below, and subscribe to join in on the fun. Today I'll be teaching how to make a long sleeve dress. It's been pretty nippy here where I'm at, but I still wanted to wear a dress, so what's a girl to do but make something new? For this one, we went with the Sedge stitch for texture, a boat neck for style, and longer sleeves, plus a slightly fitted skirt to keep us toasty. Speaking of, if you're looking for wearables that'll keep you warm and toasty, you are in the right place. We have hundreds of modern crochet designs and patterns that'll keep the cold weather at bay, including new patterns weekly, so consider clicking the bell to subscribe and you'll never miss an upload. Also, do me a huge favor and give this video a big thumbs up if you like it, or 2 thumbs down if you don't. Either way, it's a great way to show support so I can keep putting out free tutorials every Wednesday and Sunday. Now, it's time to get on the show, so without further ado, for this project, any category 4 yarn will work, but I used a total of 850 grams of yarn. That's about 1,000 yards if you're stateside. As for tools, a 5mm hook, scissors, stitch markers, and a tape measure. There is a written pattern down below. Use offer code TCDDIY for a discount off any $9.99 plus order, and enter this week's pattern giveaway by telling us your favorite sport to watch. Now, it used to be basketball for me, but I've actually been watching a lot of football recently, and it's quite exciting. Details for the giveaway down below. We're using 4 stitches for this project, and they'll be as follows. Chain, slip stitch, single crochet, half double crochet, and double crochet. Our tutorials are made for a size small, but you can adjust it for your size, and we explain how to in the video, so let's get started. Getting started on this dress, we're all going to grab our category 4 yarn and make a slip knot. Next, we're all going to grab our 5mm hook, and we're all going to start with our prep chain. Now this chain is just to figure out the sizing that we need for our shoulder band. This isn't actually going to be worked into our piece. What we're going to want to do first is make a chain that is in multiples of 3 that ends on an odd number, starting at the top of our underarm, across our chest, to the top of our other underarm. So I've just finished up my front panel's prep chain. I have a total of 45 chains. That's just about 11 inches or 28 centimeters. Now for everyone, right after that odd number chain, we're going to do a chain extra, and that is going to count as the front panel. So now I have a total of 46 chains. Now just so we know how many chains we have for the front panel, I'm going to insert my stitch marker into that last chain. And now we're going to make a chain in multiples of 3 that ends on an even number, from the top of our underarm, around our shoulder, to the top of our underarm along the back. And I now have my shoulder prep chain. I made a total of 24 chains, that is not including my stitch marker stitch, and that's just about 6 inches or 15 centimeters. Now from here, we don't need to continue on with our prep chain because the amount of chains that we have for our front panel will be the same for my back. So for those of you that have my numbers, I had 46 for my front, so I will now have 46 for my back. And both of our shoulder chains are going to be the same as well. So I just made a chain of 24. So for my other shoulder, it will be 24 for me. Now make sure that you write down the amount of chains that we have for our front/back and for our shoulders, because we're going to need it within the next step. But now that we have our prep chain all done, we can take our chain apart and get started with our shoulder band. So getting started with our shoulder band, we're going to use our same category 4 yarn, our same 5mm hook, and we're going to make a chain the height that we'd like for our shoulder band to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 1 inch or 2 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 4. Now that we have our chain, we are going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, let's insert with a slip stitch. So bring our hook down into that chain. We're then going to yarn over and pull through both loops on our hook. There's our first slip stitch. Let's do the next one. Into that following chain, insert your hook and gently yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. And once more, into that next chain, insert your hook, yarn over, and pull through everything. And continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly after every stitch, otherwise the falling row may be too tight to work into. So I've now put 1 slip stitch into every chain. Now for the rest of our shoulder band, we're going to be doing back loop slip stitch rows to get a really pretty ribbing and to get some stretch. So what we're going to do at the end of our row is chain 1 and flip our work. Now we're going to start by finding the last stitch from our previous row, and we're going to insert into that back loop. Then we're going to yarn over and gently pull through everything on our hook. Let's do that again. Into that next stitch's back loop, insert your hook, gently yarn over, pull through everything, and continue with 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And once we reach the end of the row, all we're going to do is chain 1, flip our work, and then repeat. So 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch again. Now we're going to continue to repeat our back loop slip stitch rows for the same amount of chains that we made for our front panel. So for those of you that have my numbers, I made a total of 46 chains. So I will meet you back when I have 46 back loop slip stitch rows. So I am back. I have a total of 46 rows, and that's the same amount of chains that I made for my front panel. Now from here, we're going to need to insert our stitch markers just so we know what is the front and back and what is the shoulders. So we are all going to need 8 stitch markers, 4 of each color. And what we're going to do is decide which color is going to be the front and back and which ones are going to be for the shoulders. So I'm going to start with my purple stitch markers for my front and back panel. What I'm going to do is insert my stitch marker into the first row that we have here, so I know where the beginning of my front panel is, and then into the last row that I have here so that I know where the end of my front panel is. And now that we have this, we're going to continue on with our back loop slip stitch rows, but now we're going to be working the shoulder portion. So at the end of this row, let's do 1 back loop slip stitch row, and then I'll meet you back at the end. So just chain 1, flip our work, and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So this is my last row that I have for my front panel here, and I just did another back loop slip stitch row. Just so we know where the shoulder is going to start and end, I'm going to insert my baby blue stitch marker now, because my baby blue is for my shoulders, into the edge of this row, just so I know where my shoulder starts. Now from here, we're going to continue on with the same back loop slip stitch rows, so exactly the same for the same amount of chains that we made for the shoulder. So I did a total of 24 chains for my shoulder, so including this first row, I'm going to make 24 falling rows. So I am back, and I have just finished the same amount of rows as shoulder chains that I made. So for those of you that have my numbers, I had a total of 24 shoulder chains. So from my first stitch marker that I have right here all the way to my last row that I have inserted my stitch marker into as well, I have a total of 24 rows. We want to make sure that we're inserting the same color stitch marker as our shoulder stitch marker into this last row so we know where the shoulder is. Now from here, since we are at the end of our shoulder, we're going to do the same amount of rows that we have for the front panel, that will be for the back, and then once we have our back panel rows, making sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into the first and into the last of those rows, we're going to do just one more section, and that is for the shoulder. And we want to make sure that we're inserting our shoulder color stitch markers into the first and into the last row for the shoulder portion as well. When we have the entirety of our shoulder band finished up, I will meet you back so that we can seam everything together. So right before we seam our shoulder band together, just to make sure that everyone is on track, from the first row that we did, we have our front panel, our shoulder portion, then we have our back panel, and then our second shoulder portion. Now from here, we're going to seam everything together, so let's make sure that our work is not twisted, and we're going to place our 2 edges on top of each other and insert our hook into the corner stitches. And we're now going to yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, connecting both our front and back panel, and now we're going to do an outside loop slip stitch seam. So let's all start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert only into that front loop. Next, let's all find that next stitch into the back panel and insert only into that back loop. And then when we have those 3 loops on our hook, we're going to yarn over, pull through all 3. Let's do this again. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert only into that front loop. into the next stitch into the back panel, insert only into that back loop, then yarn over, pull through all 3 loops. And we're going to continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. So now that our shoulder band seam is all finished up, we're now going to single crochet across the top of our panels. So right after our seam, we're all going to chain 1, and we're going to be putting 1 single crochet into every side row, but making sure that once we work into those side rows that we have our stitch markers in, that we're inserting our stitch marker into the top of that stitch. So let's get started. I'm going to find my first side row, and this raised row is my first side row right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook. Now since this is a stitch marker stitch, I'm going to take my stitch marker out for now, and then I'm going to do 1 single crochet, and making sure I'm inserting my same stitch marker into the top of that stitch, just so I know where the front and back and shoulders are. Let's do our next side row. This divot is my following side row. I'm going to insert my hook in through that top loop, insert my hook with 1 single crochet, into my following side row, which is this raised row, find that top loop, insert with 1, and then let's just do 1 more, into our following divot right here, insert into there with a single crochet. And we're going to continue our single crochet row, making our way all the way around, making sure that we're inserting our stitch marker into the stitches that's worked into those side rows, and making sure that we're not getting our colors mixed up. Make your way all the way around and slip stitch into that chain space, and then do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so our single crochet row along our shoulder band is all finished. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut, and now we're going to get started on the underarm portion so we can set our shoulder band off to the side for now. So we're going to grab our same category 4 yarn, our same 5mm hook, and we're all going to start by making a chain that is in multiples of 3 that starts about 1 inch underneath our underarm down to where we want the bottom of this top to be, keeping in mind that we will have a waistband and the rest of the dress portion as well. So I made a chain that stops right about where my waist is, so that's a total of 6.5 inches or 17 centimeters for me, so I'm going to make a chain of 27. So now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Now we're going to get started on our sedge stitch. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, we're going to start with our first sedge stitch set, and our first sedge stitch set is always going to be the same for every row. And that's going to be 1 half double and 1 double crochet into the same stitch. So we're all going to yarn over and insert our hook into that second chain from our hook. So bring our hook down, insert in through that chain, we're going to yarn over, pull through for 3 loops on our hook, then we're going to yarn over, pull through all 3, that is our half double crochet, and we're going to do 1 double crochet into that same chain. So yarn over, insert your hook into that same chain, pull through. When we have 3 loops on our hook, we're now going to yarn over, pull through 2, and yarn over, pull through 2. That is our double crochet and our first sedge stitch set. From here on out, each of our sedge stitch sets is now going to be a single half double double into the same stitch. So right after every sedge stitch set, we are going to skip the following 2 stitches, because if we work into those 2 stitches, we're going to be accidentally increasing. So this is my first set, we're going to skip 1, skip 2, and into that following stitch, insert, starting with a single crochet. So insert your hook, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, there's our single crochet, now a half double and double into the same stitch, so yarn over, into that same chain, pull through, yarn over, pull through 3, and then into that same chain one more time, yarn over, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, pull through 2. Now that is going to be every sedge stitch set from here on out for the rest of the row. So 1 single, 1 half double, and 1 double crochet all into that same stitch. Let's do this again. Like I said, after every set we're going to skip 1 and skip 2. So we're skipping the following 2 stitches because the half double and the double actually count as those 2 stitches. So skip 1, skip 2 into the following, a single, a half double, and a double crochet. And just once more, skip 1, skip 2, into the following, a single, a half double, and a double, and we're going to continue this until we all have 2 chains left. We are nearly finished with our first sedge stitch row. We should all have 1, 2 chains left, and now into that last chain we're going to do an increase. So at the end of every odd number row we're going to do an increase that is going to be a single, half double, and 2 double crochets into that last stitch. So all we're going to do is skip that second to last chain, and into that last, start with 1 single, into that same last chain, 1 half double, and then into that same last chain, 2 double crochets, and this is going to count as our increase of 4. So there's 1 double, and then here is my second double crochet for that increase. Now our row 1 is complete, so let's get started on our row 2. For every even number row, we are not going to be doing an increase, so we're all just going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now getting started on our row 2, our first sedge stitch set is always going to be just 1 half double and a double crochet into that first stitch. Sew yarn over, into that first stitch, insert with a half double, and then into that same first stitch, insert with a double crochet. Now that's our first sedge stitch set. Now all of our following sets is going to be single half double double. So just like before, we're going to skip 1, skip 2, and into that following stitch, a single, a half double, and a double crochet all into that same stitch. And from here we're going to continue to skip 2 stitches, do a sedge stitch set until we have 2 stitches left. Now a really quick tip before I let you guys go, each of our sedge stitch sets is going to be worked into the previous row's single crochet to get the texture that we want. So just to get started on our following set, we are still going to skip 1, skip 2, and into that following stitch that we should be worked into. It's going to be our single crochet from our previous row, and we can tell because it's just a little bit shorter than the rest of our stitches. So skip 1, skip 2, into that next stitch, a single, half double, and double, and I'll meet you back when we have just 2 stitches left. So we've made our way all the way down with our row 2, and we should all have 1, 2 stitches left. If it looks like we just have 1 stitch, just flip your work over, finding that first stitch. It may be a little hard to see because it could be a little tucked underneath, but we should all have 1, 2 stitches left. And now since we're along the bottom, so at the end of our even number row, we're going to do a half double crochet just to close it off and keep it blunt. Sew yarn over, skip 1, into the following, insert, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3, and now our row 2 is complete. From here, we're going to continue to repeat these 2 rows for the underarm portion that we need. So let's just get started on the following 2 rows. So we're going to chain 1 and flip our work. We're going to do our first sedge stitch set, which is always going to be a half double, and double crochet into that same first stitch. You're going to skip 2, and into the following is now going to be a single half double double, and we're going to continue on with our sedge stitch sets until we have 2 stitches left. We're now at the end of our row 3, and we should now all have 1, 2 stitches left, and at the end of every odd number row we're going to close it off with an increase. So we're going to skip that second to last stitch, and into that last stitch we're going to insert with a single, a half double, and then 2 double crochets all into that same last stitch, and that counts as our increase of 4. And that is our increase. Just to get started on our following even number row, we're all going to chain 1, flip our work, and just like all of our previous rows, start our first sedge stitch with a half double and a double crochet, skip 1, skip 2, and then insert in with a single half double double, and continue this until we have 2 stitches left. We're now at the end of our row 4, and just to close off every even number row, it's going to be 1 half double crochet into the last stitch. So we're going to skip that second to last stitch, yarn over, into that last with 1 half double crochet, and that's it. From here we're going to continue to repeat these 2 previous rows until we have an underarm portion that can reach from mid underarm to the corner of our underarm. Now this is going to be the best way to get more width to this piece, so if you'd like a larger size or a baggier fit, continue this until you get the underarm portion that you need. I'll meet you back after an odd number row. So my underarm portion is finished. I have a total of 7 rows and my width is just about 2.5 inches or 7 centimeters, and we should have all ended right after an odd number row. Now from here, this is going to be different for everyone. Since this should have reached from mid-underarm over to the corner of our underarm, some of us are now going to make a chain that reaches all the way up to our shoulder band. So how we're going to figure out if we need to make a chain or not is the tail end that we have. We're going to want to make sure that that tail end stays 1 inch underneath our underarm, because if this falls a little bit lower, then that's going to give us more stitches to do, giving us a wider sleeve to work with, which is fine if that's the look that you want, but for the design that we are currently doing, we want a thinner sleeve. So with the underarm portion that I currently have, I actually don't need to do any more chains. I'm just going to connect mine straight into the band. But if you guys do need to add chains, that is completely fine as well. All you are going to do is make a chain that is in multiples of 3 that does reach up to your shoulder band. But connecting our underarm, whether if you have a chain or not, is going to be exactly the same, and our following rows working across our shoulder band for the body is exactly the same as well. So after you have made your chain, if you need to make your chain, we're going to grab our shoulder band and slip stitch it into our front panel stitch marker stitch. So my front panel stitch marker stitches were my purple stitch marker stitches. So all we're going to do, whether if we have our chain or not, is we're going to slip stitch into that stitch marker stitch for our front panel. Now this is mine right here. I'm going to take out my stitch marker because I don't need it anymore. And all we're going to do is yarn over, pull through everything on our hook. Now once when our underarm portion is attached to our stitch marker stitch, we're now going to flip our work and automatically start working down with our sedge stitch sets. So no matter if your first sedge stitch set is going to be worked into that stitch marker stitch or into your first chain, we're going to continue on per usual. So we're going to insert into that first stitch with a half double and a double crochet. Skip the following 2 stitches and into the next, a single half double double. So the rest of this is going to be per usual. We're going to continue this until we have 2 stitches left. At the end of our row, since this is an even number row, we are still going to finish it off with a half double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row, chain 1, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch sets, working our way all the way up back to our shoulder band until we have 2 stitches left. So I am back. My first row connected into my shoulder band is finished. At the end of the row, I did a chain 1, flip my work, and did my sedge stitch all the way back, and we should all have 2 stitches left. Now we don't need to do an increase or a decrease into either end of this portion that's connected into the shoulder band. So all we're going to do is yarn over and half double crochet into the last stitch from our previous row. So we're going to skip 1, into that last stitch, insert with 1 half double crochet, just like how I do at the end of every even number row. And now we're going to connect it into the base. So connecting every odd number row into the base, what we're going to do is count up 1, 2 stitches, and into that second stitch into the base, we're going to insert with a slip stitch. And now our odd number row is finished. Now just to work our way up to the following even number row, all we're going to do is slip stitch into that following stitch into the base, so just slip stitching into that next stitch. Neither of those slip stitches into the base count as a stitch, and we're going to flip our work. And from here, we're just going to repeat. So our first sedge stitch set is going to be a half double double into that first stitch, skip 2 stitches, then our normal single half double double into that following stitch, making sure that we close her off with a half double crochet. Then we're going to do our following sedge stitch set, making sure that that row ends on a half double crochet as well, and we should be back at the base. So we're going to slip stitch it into the base the same way that we just did. And we're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way across until we reach our following front panel stitch marker stitch. Our last row should end along the bottom, so right after an even number row, and then I will meet you back so that we can do our underarm portion from there. So I am back and I have made my way all the way across with my sedge stitches, and my last row is worked into my front panel stitch marker stitch. Now this next step may be a little bit different for everyone. Now, for those of you that made a chain that reached all the way up to our shoulder band, what you are going to do on this side is put your stitch marker into the same amount of chains that we made that reached up to our shoulder band from the top. So as an example, if you made a total chain of 9, along this side, insert your stitch marker into the 9th stitch from the top, because we want to make sure that both sides are even. And for those of us that did not make a chain, we don't need to insert our stitch marker, because we worked all the way up into the shoulder band. And we're all going to do our sedge stitch, making our way all the way up until we have 5 stitches left. Now, since I didn't make a chain, I will have 5 stitches until I reach my shoulder band. But for those of you that needed to insert your stitch marker because you did make a chain, I will meet you back when you have 5 stitches before your stitch marker. So I am back and we should all have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches left. Now what we're going to do is skip 1 stitch, and then we're going to do a decrease of 4 double crochets. So let's all start with the yarn over. We're going to skip that following stitch, and then into that 4th to last stitch, insert, pull through, into that 3rd to last, insert, pull through, 2nd to last, insert, pull through, and into that last, insert, and pull through. As you guys can see, this is my last stitch right before my shoulder band, or for those of you that made a chain, you should be worked into the stitch right before your stitch marker stitch. Now from here, we should have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook, so we're going to yarn over, pull through the first 5 loops, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, then yarn over and pull through the last 2 loops on our hook. That is how we do a decrease of 4 double crochets. Now to do the following row, we are not going to do any increases or decreases because we only increased into every other row for the other underarm portion and we need it all to match. So to get started on the following row, we're all going to chain 1 and flip our work. Now we are going to make our way all the way down with our sedge stitch sets. At the end of the row, chain 1, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch sets, making our way all the way back up until we have 5 stitches left again, and then I'll meet you back just once more to do our decrease. I've made my way back up with my 3rd underarm row, and I left 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches, and now we're going to do another decrease of 4 double crochets. So yarn over, skip that 5th to last stitch, into the following, insert, pull through, into that following, insert, pull through, into the 2nd to last, pull through, and into that last stitch, pull through. We're now going to yarn over, pull through the first 5 loops, leaving 2 loops left, then yarn over, pull through 2. And from here, we're going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we have the same amount of underarm rows as the other underarm portion that we got started on our front panel with. Once we do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then I will meet you back just to talk you guys through how to do the back panel. So I am back and the entirety of my front panel is all finished. I did do a chain up of 1 and cut right after my last row, and now we're going to repeat everything that we just did here for the back panel. So just as a refresher, we're all going to start by making a chain for the same amount of chains that we got started with when it came to doing our underarm. Then we're going to do the same amount of rows and increases as the front panel. Now for those of you that did make a chain, go ahead and make your chain and then slip stitch it. Let's turn our work over into that back panel stitch marker stitch that we have. We're going to connect it, work our way all the way through the back, and then do the same underarm portion that we did for the front panel. So exactly the same. Once we have both our front and back panel finished up, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and I'll meet you back to seam it all together. So I am back. Both my front and my back panel are finished, and now we're going to seam our sides so we can get started on our sleeve. So to seam our sides, we're going to do a single crochet seam. So let's all start by making sure that our work is flipped wrong side out, meaning the seam that we have for the shoulder band is now along the inside. We are then going to insert our hook into the bottom corner stitch of our front and back panel, insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure. And now from here, we're going to single crochet, making sure we're working in through both the front and the back panel at the same time. So start by finding that first stitch into the front panel and insert. Find that next stitch into the back panel and insert and single crochet. Let's do that again. Next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single. And we're going to continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut, and then repeat on the other side. So now that our sides are all seamed up, we're going to flip our work right side out, meaning the seam that we just did for our side is now along the inside, And now we're going to do a prep row for our sleeve. So all we're going to do is single crochet along the bottom of our armhole just to make it easier to connect. So we're all going to start by inserting our same 5mm hook into the stitch that our front panel is worked into. Now it could be the front or the back since they do look exactly the same, but it should be the stitch that's right next to our shoulder stitch marker stitch because we don't want to take any of these stitches away. So into that stitch that should be occupied, go ahead and insert your hook, insert your yarn onto your hook. Now let's do our single crochet row. Now working our way down, we're going to be alternating between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row. So let's all start by finding our first side row. This is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with just 1 single crochet. Now let's find our following side row, which this is mine right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert with 2 single crochets. So there is 1 single crochet into that same top loop with a second single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochets into every side row until we reach our side seam right over here. So we've made our way all the way down with our single crochet row and we are right next to our side seam. So what we're going to do is insert a stitch marker into that last single crochet that we just did so that we know where the middle stitch is for this side. And then working our way up the other side, we're going to insert a stitch marker into that first stitch on the other side of our seam so that we'll end up having 2 middle stitches. So finding our following side row on the other side of our side seam, we're going to start with 1 single crochet. So go ahead and insert your hook into there with 1 single crochet. And I will be inserting a stitch marker into that stitch as well so we know where our 2 middle stitches are. So we're going to insert. And then from here, we're going to continue to alternate between 1 to 2 single crochet into every side row. And then once we make our way all the way up, slip stitch into that occupied stitch that our back panel is worked into, so not into that shoulder stitch marker stitch. Making sure that you're slip stitching into there, do a chain up of 1 and cut. Alright, so I am back. The single crochet prep row for our sleeve is all finished up and now we're going to start working on the length of our sleeve. So we're all going to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up. And then we're going to insert our hook into our stitch marker stitch along the bottom. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and then we're going to make a chain that is in multiples of 3, the length that we'd like for our sleeve to be. So this can be long or short. I'd like for mine to be just about 18.5 inches or 47 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 75. So now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. And into that chain that we blocked off, the second chain from our hook, we're going to do our first sedge stitch. So yarn over, into that second chain, insert with a half double and double crochet. And from here, just like before, we're going to skip 2 into the following, do our following sedge stitch, so a single, half double, and double. And we're going to continue to do our sedge stitch until we have 2 chains left. We've made our way all the way down with our sedge stitch row. We should have 2 chains left. And just like how we did for the first half of our underarm portion, we're going to do an increase into that last chain. So we're going to skip the second to last chain, and into the last, we're going to insert with a single, also with a half double, and with 2 double crochets. And now that we've just finished up our increase, we're going to need to connect it into the base. So just for this first row, we're going to slip stitch it into that same stitch that our chain is worked into so that we don't miss out on this stitch. So insert, yarn over, pull through everything, and this slip stitch does not count as a stitch. Then to work our way up to the following row, we're going to slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch as well. Flip our work, and now we're going to do our sedge stitch all the way down. So our even number rows is not going to have any increases or decreases, pretty much the same way that we had the first portion of our underarm. At the end of the row, go ahead and chain 1, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch, making our way all the way back down. I will meet you back when we have 2 stitches left to do the increase and connect it into the base together just once more. So we are back and we have 1, 2, 3 rows nearly finished. At the end of our third row, we should have 1, 2 stitches left, and now we're going to do an increase together. So into that last stitch, we're going to insert with a single, a half double, and 2 doubles. And now that our increase is finished, we're going to connect it into the base. So connecting it into the base for this portion, all we're going to do is just find that next available stitch into the base, slip stitch into there to close off this row. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base, flip our work, and then repeat our 2 previous rows, making our way all the way up until we're worked into that last single crochet that we have right before our shoulder band. Now we should have the same amount of rows as single crochets from our middle stitch marker stitch all the way up here. And once we do, I will meet you back so we can work across the shoulder band. So I've made my way all the way up with the increased side of my sleeve. And now we're going to work into the shoulder portion together. Now working into the shoulder portion, it's going to be done exactly the same way as we did the body. So let's just get the first few rows started. Now for those of you that are like me and your last row for your increased portion of your sleeve ended at the base, all we're going to do is slip stitch into that next stitch into the base and then work our way down with our first row for the shoulder band portion. Now for those of you that had ended along the outside, work our way all the way down at the end of that row, chain 1, flip our work, and then work our way all the way back towards the shoulder base, just so I can remind you how we're going to connect it into the base again. Now for those of you that have actually ended along the outside for the increased portion of your sleeve, what you're going to do is chain 1, flip your work, and just work your way all the way back. Either way, I will meet you back once when we are at the shoulder band. So just for those of us that ended along the base, to get started on our shoulder band portion of our sleeve, we're going to slip stitch into that next available stitch that we have, which should be our stitch marker stitch or the first available stitch into the shoulder band. We should be done working into the side portion of our front panel. So go ahead and insert your hook into that following stitch into the base with a slip stitch, flip our work, and work our way all the way down with our sedge stitch sets. Make your way all the way back up, and then I will meet you back along the base. So I am back. When I left you guys, I made my first shoulder band row that made my way all the way down to the outer edge, did a chain 1, flipped my work, and then made my way all the way back. Now we aren't doing any increases or decreases for the shoulder band portion, because remember, the shoulder band portion is going to be done exactly the same way as the body. So I ended off my row with a half double crochet into the last stitch. What we're going to do from here is connect it. So just like how we did the body portion, not the increased portion for the underarm, we're going to count up 1, 2 stitches and slip stitch into that second stitch into the base. And once we have that, we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base just to work our way up to the following row, flip our work, and then work our way back down with our sedge stitch. Now we're going to continue to repeat those rows with no increases and no decreases until we reach our shoulder band stitch marker stitch along the back, or the last available stitch that we have right before the decreased portion of our sleeve. When we've made our way all the way down, I will meet you guys back. We have just made our way all the way up and around with the shoulder band portion of our sleeve, and our last row is worked into our stitch marker stitch, or that last available stitch that we have, before we need to start working on our decreases. So getting started on the decrease portion, if you all ended along the base like me, what you're going to do is slip stitch into that next available stitch, which should be working down the back panel portion, and then we're going to do a regular sedge stitch row after that, because we did an increase row into every other row for the increase side. So once we've slip stitched into that next stitch into the base, worked our way all the way down, when we reach the end, chain 1, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch, making our way all the way back, leaving the last 5 stitches. So we're going to do the same decreases that we did for the second underarm portion for the front and back panel. Now for those of you that have just ended along the outer edge of the sleeve, chain 1, flip our work, and then do your sedge stitch back until again we have 5 stitches left. Then I will meet you back to remind you how we're going to connect it into the base and how to do our decrease. So those of you that have ended along the base just like me, we're going to find that following stitch into the front panel, insert your hook into that stitch just to work our way up to the following row, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch, and then make our way all the way back until we have 5 stitches left. So we have made our way all the way down back towards the base with our decrease row. We should all have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 stitches left, and now we're going to do a decrease of 4 double crochets. So getting that started, we're all going to yarn over. Just like how we did for the second underarm portion for the front panel, we're going to skip one into that fourth to last, insert, pull through, into that third to last, pull through, second to last, pull through, and last, pull through for a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 loops on our hook. Then just yarn over, pull through the first 5 loops, then yarn over and pull through 2. And that's it. Now we're going to connect it into the base. Now connecting it into the base for our decrease rows is going to be the same way that we connected it for the increase rows. So all we're going to do to connect it is just find that next available stitch into the base, this is mine right here, and slip stitch into that next available stitch, so you're not going to skip a stitch anymore. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base, flip our work, and then do our sedge stitch row, but working our way out towards the outer edge of our sleeve, we will not be doing a decrease. So we're only decreasing into every other row. We're just going to continue to repeat these 2 rows, making sure that we're connecting it into the base the same way that we just did, until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, I'll meet you back to seam everything together. So we've made our way all the way down with the decrease end of my sleeve. Now we're going to do a single crochet seam to seam it all together, just like how we did for our sides. So now let's flip our work wrong side out. So now that our work is flipped wrong side out, we're now going to do our single crochet seam. So let's all start by inserting our hook into that first stitch into the front panel, insert your hook. Into that next stitch that we have into the back panel, insert into that first stitch, and we're going to single crochet. Let's do this just once more. Into that next stitch into the front panel, insert, next stitch into the back panel, insert, and single crochet. And that's it. We're going to continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And just as a really quick tip, on the decrease end of our sleeve, we actually may have a few extra stitches than the chain that we started off with. If that's the case, and if you're off by anywhere between 1 or 3 stitches, that is completely fine. That's just going to be a little bit different for everyone because of the decreases that we did. It might not exactly match up with the chain that we made for our sleeve. But that's completely fine. We're just going to continue with our single crochet seam until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. It'll all even out once we finish up our cuff. So now that our sleeve is all seamed up, we're now going to get started on our cuff. So we're going to start by flipping our work right side out, meaning the seam that we have for the sleeve is along the inside, and then we're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our sleeve. Then we're going to do a single crochet row. So we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, do a chain up of 1, and we're just going to put 1 single crochet into every side row. So let's do the next one. This is my following side row right here. So I'm going to insert into that top loop with 1 single crochet, into that following top loop with another single crochet. Pretty simple. We're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around, and then slip stitch into that chain space. Now that our single crochet row for our cuff is all finished up, we're now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our cuff to be. I want mine to be just about 3 inches or 8 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 12. Now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. Into that chain that we blocked off for the second chain from our hook, we're going to insert with a slip stitch, so insert your hook, yarn over, and pull through everything on our hook. Let's do that again. Into that next stitch, insert, gently pull through everything. And we're going to continue with 1 slip stitch into every chain, remembering not to tug too tightly, otherwise the following row is going to be too tight to work into. And now that we put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're now going to connect it into the base. So what we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base, insert, yarn over, and pull through everything with a slip stitch. That slip stitch does not count as a stitch, we just needed to connect it into the base, and now we're going to slip stitch into that following stitch into the base to work our way up to the next row. So slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. That also doesn't count as a stitch, we just needed to work our way up to the following row. Flip our work, and now we're going to put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, just like how we did for the collar. So into that next stitch's back loop, insert into that back loop, and gently pull through everything. And that's it. We're going to continue to do our back loop slip stitches until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, making sure that we're connecting it into the base the same way that we just did. I'll meet you back when we don't have any more stitches left, so that we can seam everything together. So our outside loop slip stitch rows are all finished. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it all up together. So this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, the same seam that we did for the shoulder band. So let's make sure that our work is flipped right side out. And then we're going to insert our hook into the first stitch into the front panel's front loop. So into that first stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. Into that first stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, gently yarn over and pull through everything on our hook. And that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. Then we're going to repeat everything we just did here on the other side. So now that both of our sleeves are all finished up, we're ready to get started on the waistband. So we're going to make sure the work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and then we're going to insert our hook into any one of the side rows that we have along the bottom of our piece. Then we're going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and now we're going to do a single crochet row. So we're just going to put 1 single crochet into every side row, and when we make our way all the way around and slip stitch into that chain space, try on our piece just to make sure that it'll fit, because this single crochet row is going to be as wide as this piece can stretch. If it's a little too tight, redo some stitches with a looser grip, or if it's too loose, redo some stitches with a tighter grip. So I am back and my single crochet row is all finished up, and now we're going to make a chain the length that we'd like for our waistband to be. I'd like for mine to be just about 1.5 inches or 3 centimeters, so I'm going to start by making a chain 6. So now that we have our chain, we're going to block off that last chain and do a chain 1. And just like how we did for our cuff, we're going to be putting 1 slip stitch into every chain. So into that chain that we blocked off, or the second chain from our hook, insert with a slip stitch and put 1 slip stitch into every chain, making sure that we're not tugging too tightly after every stitch. And now that we put 1 slip stitch into every chain, we're going to connect it into the base, exactly like how we did our cuff. So find that next stitch into the base, insert with a slip stitch to close off our row 1. Then to work our way up to the following row, slip stitch into that next stitch into the base. Those 2 slip stitches into the base don't count as a stitch. We're going to flip our work and put 1 back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that's it. We're going to continue to repeat our back loop slip stitch rows with no increases and no decreases, connecting it into the base the same way that we just did, making our way all the way around. And when we don't have any more stitches left to work into, I will meet you back so that we can seam everything together. So I've made my way all the way around with my back loop slip stitch rows. I don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam it all together. So we're going to make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to do the same outside loop slip stitch seam that we did for the shoulder band and for the cuff. So let's all start by inserting our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and just to do the first one, we're all going to start by finding that first stitch into the front panel, insert into that front loop. We're going to find that next stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and we're going to continue this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. When we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. So now that our waistband is seamed, we're now going to get started on the length of our skirt portion. So we're going to still make sure that our work is flipped right side out, right side up, and we're going to single crochet along the bottom. We're then going to insert our yarn onto our hook, pull through, and just do a single crochet row. So we're going to chain 1, and we're going to put 1 single crochet into every side row. So this is my first side row right here. I'm going to find that top loop and insert my hook with a single crochet. Let's do our following side row, which is this divot for me. I'm going to find that top loop, single crochet again, and we're going to continue doing this, making our way all the way around and slip stitch into that chain space. So now that our single crochet row is all finished up, we can now get started on the length of our skirt. So we're going to want to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and we're now going to make a chain the length that we'd like for the bottom of our dress portion to be. So you can make this as long or as short as you'd like. I'd like for mine to be just about 17.5 inches or 44 centimeters. So I'm going to start by making a chain 65. And I'm just going to do a small sample size with you. So now that we have our chain, we are going to block off that last chain, do a chain 2. That chain 2 doesn't count as a stitch, that's our turning chain. And now we're just going to put 1 half double crochet into every chain. So yarn over, insert your hook into that chain that we blocked off, or the third chain from our hook. Then we're going to yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through all 3. That's our first half double crochet. We're going to continue with 1 half double crochet into every chain. Now that we've put 1/2 double crochet into every chain, we're going to need to connect it into the base. Now we're going to want to make sure that our work is still flipped right side out, right side up, and that we're working clockwise or to the left, because the ribbing that we're going to have is not reversible. But once we know that we're working in the right direction, all we're going to do is find that next available stitch into the base, which this is mine right here. I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and now our first row is connected. Next, we're going to work our way up to the following row, so slip stitch into that next available stitch into the base. And now we're going to flip our work. And this is going to be a back loop half double and back loop slip stitch row sequence. So we're now going to be putting one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. So finding that next available stitch, insert into that back loop, pull through everything, and continue to put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch. And now that we're at the end of our row 2, we're going to get started on our row 3, and that's going to be a half double crochet row within the back loops. So chain 2 and flip your work. And just to do the first one together, we're going to yarn over, find the last stitch from our previous row and insert into that back loop with a half double crochet, and continue with 1/2 double crochet into every stitch until you reach the base, so we can connect it into the base once more. And now that we've put one back loop half double crochet into every stitch, we're going to connect it into the base again. So how we're going to do that is just find that next available stitch into the base, slip stitch into there to close off our half double crochet row. Then, just to work our way up to the following row, insert your hook into that following stitch into the base, flip our work, and put one back loop slip stitch into every stitch, and that is it. From here, we're just going to continue to repeat our 2 previous rows until we don't have any more stitches left to work into. And then I will meet you back so that we can seam everything together. So we've made our way all the way around with our back loop half double and back loop slip stitch rows. We don't have any more stitches left to work into, so now we're going to seam everything together. So this is going to be an outside loop slip stitch seam, the same seam that we did for the waistband, the shoulder band, and the cuffs. So let's make sure that our work is still flipped right side out. Then we're going to insert our hook into the corner stitch of both the front and the back panel. And all we're going to do is yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, do a chain up of 1 to secure, and just to do the first one, since we already know how to do the seam, we're going to find that first stitch into the front panel and insert into that front loop. On the first stitch into the back panel, insert into that back loop, yarn over, pull through everything on our hook, and that's it. We're going to continue doing this until we don't have any more stitches left to work into, and when we don't, do a chain up of 1 and cut. And now that our dress is all seamed up, we are all done. Last thing we're going to have to do is just weave in all of our ends. And there you have it. I hope y'all enjoyed the tutorial. Join us on Instagram, Pinterest, or Twitter. Those links are down below. And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. I'll catch you on the next one. Bye!